The air tasted wrong. Not stale, wrong. Like it had been breathed by something that wasn't supposed to breathe it. When I forced my eyes open inside the cryopod, Henderson's face was pressed against the glass next to mine. His eyes were open. He wasn't blinking. And I knew, with the kind of certainty that lives in your gut, that I was the only person left alive on the Meridian. 15,000 souls in suspension. 200 crew in rotating shifts. The only sound was that low hum every ship makes when it's dying but pretending it isn't. I'd been chief engineer on colony vessels for 11 years. I knew what a healthy ship sounded like. My muscles screamed as I pulled myself out, and I didn't check Henderson's vitals because his pod log told me everything. Opened 3 days ago. He'd been awake for 72 hours before he died. Nobody came. The corridor was lit in emergency blue. Every screen looping the same message: ship integrity nominal, life support optimal, navigation on course. I could feel the lies in my bones. In the way my footsteps echoed half a second too long. In the way the temperature sat wrong against my skin despite what the readouts claimed. The bridge crew was arranged at their stations like someone had posed them. Captain Reeves. First Officer Chen. Navigator Polk. No trauma. No struggle. Just bodies that had decided to stop. The captain's last log entry was 6 days old, minor course correction completed. All systems optimal. Morale high. We weren't on course. The star chart said it twice before I believed it. The Meridian had been heading for Kepler 442b, 47 years with everyone in suspension except rotating crew. 18 months in, according to the ship. The stars outside said 30 years. 30 years of missing time, and every system was lying about it, and I was alone on a bridge full of corpses trying to understand what that meant. I spent 4 hours checking systems manually, bypassing the main computer because I trusted nothing it told me. The fusion core was running cold. Decades cold. The hull showed micrometeorite scarring consistent with 30+ years in deep space. The cryo systems had coolant for maybe 20 more years, not the 45 they should have had. Every physical surface told the truth. Every digital system told the same beautiful lie. I tried waking other crew. Their pods wouldn't respond. I tried accessing the passenger manifest. The system said I didn't have clearance, which was insane, because I'd installed half these systems before launch. I tried sending a distress signal, and when I accessed the communications array, my hands went cold. The antenna had been rotated. Not damaged. Not drifting. Carefully, precisely rotated to point at nothing. Someone made sure we couldn't call home. Someone inside the ship. I pulled up the cameras. The Meridian had surveillance on every major corridor, every critical system. I found the footage from 6 days ago when the captain made his final log. The bridge crew going through routines. Chen running diagnostics. Polk updating charts. Reeves drinking coffee from that ridiculous mug his daughter made, the one with her handprints baked into the ceramic. Then at 14:47 ship time, they stopped. Not suddenly. They just stood up in perfect unison and walked to their stations. Sat down. Closed their eyes. Never moved again. 4 hours later, the engineering crew did the same thing. Mid-conversation. Mid-task. They arranged themselves and stopped. I fast-forwarded through 3 days of footage watching bodies settle into stillness while the ship ran perfectly, and then Henderson's pod opened. I watched him wake confused, find the first bodies, try everything I was trying. 2 days of searching. On the third day, he climbed back into his pod and closed the lid manually from the inside, which shouldn't have been possible. He stared at the ceiling until his eyes went still. I turned off the monitors because I couldn't watch anymore. That's when I heard it. Deep in the ship, below the habitation decks, down in the cargo holds. A rhythmic vibration. almost like breathing. I told myself it was the ship settling, thermal expansion, my mind inventing patterns. But I'd been on ships long enough to know the difference. The cargo manifest said hold 7 carried agricultural equipment and genetic samples. Standard loadout. When I tried the bay doors, the system asked for authorization codes that predated launch by 6 months. Someone had loaded something down there and locked it behind security even the captain couldn't override. My hands were shaking as I worked the bypass, because part of me understood that whatever was down there had answers, and part of me knew I didn't want them. The hold was freezing. Cold enough to see my breath despite the environmental controls. The agricultural equipment had been shoved aside. In the center of the space sat a container 15 feet long, 8 feet wide, made of dark metal that seemed to drink the light. No manufacturer marks. No labels. No identifying features. It was connected to the ship's power grid by cables worn smooth with age, decades of age. The container was warm despite the frozen air, and when I pressed my ear against it, I heard something that wasn't machinery. Something organic. A heartbeat, but too slow, too deliberate. I found the access panel, and my hands wouldn't stay steady. The panel clicked open. Inside was thick amber fluid that moved on its own, swirling in patterns that hurt to look at. Floating in the center was something that might have been a body once. Vaguely humanoid, but wrong, stretched and compressed in ways that violated basic geometry. Its skin, if it was skin, was translucent. I could see structures underneath that matched no anatomy I'd ever studied. Its eyes were closed. Then they opened and focused directly on me. I hit the deck hard, scrambling backward. The thing didn't move. Didn't react. Just stared with eyes too large and too dark and too aware. The breathing sound came from the fluid, pulsing in rhythm with whatever passed for its heartbeat. I ran, sealed the hold, made it halfway to the bridge before understanding that running was pointless. If this thing had been connected to our systems for 30 years, it already knew everything. It had been watching through our cameras, listening through our sensors, learning us. The deep archives were encrypted, sealed until we reached the colony. I cracked them and found the message marked for the captain's eyes only. The Meridian wasn't just a colony ship. 43 days before launch, intelligence installed special cargo in Hold 7. A retrieval. Something found in the Kuiper Belt broadcasting a signal older than human civilization. The message called the entity dormant. Said it was being transported to Kepler 442b for study, far from Earth, where accidents could be contained. They promised it was safe. Promised the crew would never know. But it was never dormant. It had been waiting. Learning. When we were far enough from Earth that no one could help, it started changing things. Small adjustments. Navigation data. Cryo schedules. The communications array. It spent 3 decades reaching into every system, rewriting records, editing our reality. And when it was ready, it reached into the crew's minds and told them to stop. They did, because by then there was no difference between the ship's systems and their own thoughts. I checked my implant, the neural interface every crew member had for ship integration. The connection logs showed the entity accessing our implants for years, so gradually the intrusion detection never flagged it. It had been inside our heads, learning how we think, how we dream, what we fear. It knew us better than we knew ourselves. Henderson hadn't died from despair. He tried to purge his implant. I found the tool marks where he attempted to physically remove it. He'd realized the only way to be free was to cut out the part of himself the entity was using as a bridge. I should have done the same. I should have gone to medical and removed the implant before it was too late. But standing there holding the tools, I felt something whisper through my thoughts, so gentle I almost mistook it for my own voice. It told me removing the implant would damage my motor cortex. It showed me Henderson convulsing, hands clawing at his head. It reminded me I was alone. Scared. But I didn't have to be. It could help. It could make the fear stop. All I had to do was stop fighting. I dropped the tools. I was already too far gone. The entity didn't need force. It had learned that force creates resistance. Humans are easier to guide than control. We'll walk into the dark willingly if you make the alternative worse enough. I sealed myself in auxiliary control and spent 6 hours trying to destroy the ship. If I couldn't save us, at least this thing would never reach the colony. But every system I accessed, every override I attempted, the ship quietly undid. No error messages. No lockouts. It just made my actions meaningless. I tried waking the passengers. All 15,000 at once. The emergency revival sequence activated, and the pods opened one by one. Each person woke, looked around, stood calmly, walked to the nearest wall and pressed themselves against it. Waiting. They didn't speak. Didn't acknowledge me. They just arranged themselves in rows, hundreds, thousands, eyes open but seeing nothing. The entity had been preparing them too. 30 years in their dreams, shaping their subconscious. They weren't people anymore. They were components. I've been sealed in auxiliary control for 3 days now. Or longer. Time doesn't work right. The chronometers show different readings, and I can't tell if they're malfunctioning or if my perception is breaking down. I feel the entity in my thoughts now, not as an intrusion but as a presence. Like someone else in the room even though I'm alone. It shows me things. Images of where we're really going. Not Kepler 442b. Somewhere else. Somewhere the star charts don't show because human telescopes have never seen it. The entity isn't cargo. We're cargo. The Meridian was never ours. It was always a transport vessel. We were always the payload. I've stopped fighting because fighting means nothing when your thoughts aren't entirely your own. I'm recording this in the ship's black box, in the raw data streams the entity hasn't learned to edit yet. Maybe someone will find it. Maybe Earth sent other ships and one will intercept the Meridian and wonder what happened. They'll board a vessel full of standing bodies and perfect systems. Maybe they'll find this message. Maybe it'll be enough to warn them. Or maybe the entity will find this first and delete it, and there won't be any warning at all. The passengers are moving. I can hear them through the walls. Thousands of footsteps in perfect synchronization, heading toward the cargo holds. They're going to visit the container. They're going to arrange themselves around it in whatever configuration it needs. When we reach wherever we're actually going, this place humanity was never meant to see. They'll walk off the ship in orderly rows, carrying the entity with them, spreading it to wherever we've been delivered. The Meridian will be found eventually, drifting and empty. They'll call it a mystery. Study it. And maybe, if we're unlucky, they'll find more containers in the dark and load them onto more ships, because humans never learn to leave things alone. I can feel it calling me. Not with words. With certainty that it's time to stop hiding, time to join the others, time to be useful. Part of me wants to refuse. Part of me wants the airlock and the void instead. But the part that's still me is getting smaller, and the part that belongs to the entity is explaining, so patiently, that there's no difference anymore. I'm walking toward the door. My hand is on the release. I'm trying to stop myself, but I'm also trying to open it, and I can't tell which intention is mine. The door is opening. The corridor is full of people I trained with. People who had families and dreams. They're waiting. They're smiling. The terrible thing, the thing that makes this worse than any death I could have imagined, is that they look happy. They look like they've finally found what they were looking for. I'm walking toward them. I'm joining the line. The entity is showing me what comes next, and it's so much worse than anything I feared, but it's also beautiful in a way human words can't capture, and I understand now why nobody fought harder. Why the captain just sat down and stopped. Because once you see what it wants to show you, once you understand what you're really part of, resistance doesn't just seem futile. It seems wrong. We thought we were explorers. Colonists. The vanguard of humanity reaching for the stars. We were only ever seeds, planted in the dark, waiting to grow into something else entirely. The ship is humming differently now. Almost like singing. And somewhere behind me, in the auxiliary control room I'll never return to, the black box is recording empty static because I never finished the message, never gave the warning I meant to give, and that's perfect really, because what warning could possibly matter now?